Morón, Ciego de Ávila, Friday, March 13th, 2026. Hundreds pour into the streets, banging pots, chanting Libertad and Abajo la dictadura. The crowd reaches the local Communist Party headquarters. Furniture burns in the street. 5 people are detained. A 16-year-old named Kevin Samuel Echeverria Rodriguez is injured at the scene. The regime claims he accidentally fell from the eaves of the building. Video appears to show otherwise. 3 days after Morón erupts, a video surfaces from the Instituto Preuniversitario Roberto Rodríguez. A teacher addresses her students. Recuerden bien, esto no es una dictadura. Si esto fuera una dictadura, no estuviéramos todos aquí. She calls it socialism, with all its difficulties and errors. Then the line that detonates across the diaspora. Ojalá que todos tuvieran, especialmente en el mundo, estas condiciones que tenemos hoy en día. She follows with a threat. Any student involved in the protests will face consequences. But Periódico Cubano noticed what she could not do. After insisting Cuba is not a dictatorship, she never names what it actually is. The argument collapses into a silence she does not recognize.
Pero que además de eso, estudiante, mire para acá que estoy hablando. Hay que saber bien qué cosa es primeramente un Estado. Y recuerden bien, esto no es dictadura, quítate lo que tienes en la nariz, David. Esto no es una dictadura. Si esto fuera una dictadura, nos hubieran sentado y estuviéramos parados aquí en esta plaza. Y desde el punto de vista, y verdaderamente tenemos que niño. Primeramente porque esto es un socialismo. Todas las dificultades, todos los errores, pero es un socialismo. Pero que además de eso, ojalá que todos tuvieran, especialmente en el mundo, las condiciones que tenemos ustedes, a pesar de todas las situaciones que tenemos y toda esa crisis que hay que hacer. Desde el punto de vista, yo sinceramente les digo, yo denuncio y desde el punto de vista, no apruebo, desde el punto de vista, nada de lo que se hizo ahí. Primeramente, porque yo voy a cumplimentar especialmente, no por el menos eso, que me la dirección presente. Pero, si hay algún estudiante mezclado el dirección, vámonos.
Periódico Cubano discovers the teacher was not freelancing. The Facebook page of la Dirección Municipal de Ordenamiento Territorial y Urbanismo de Morón had published directives ordering personnel to remain reachable, monitor infrastructure, maintain informational discipline, and report incidents. The message stated, "The organization and firmness of the regime will prevail to defend the tranquility of the municipality." After the video went viral, the directives were deleted, but they had already been documented. This teacher was executing a playbook. The regime sent her to do exactly this and then erased the evidence. The video hits Instagram via @unmartitoduraco8 live and explodes within 48 hours. Cibercuba, Periódico Cubano, Cuba Headlines, TV Azteca all run it. Congress members Carlos Jimenez and Mario Díaz-Balart amplify it with hashtags, #SOS Cuba, #Patria y Vida. The phrase "Esto no es una dictadura" becomes instant dark comedy across the diaspora. They are not shocked, they are furious, because this is what they grew up with, and it is still happening. The regime runs its script. State newspaper Invasor and Cuba Debate label the Morón protests hechos vandálicos, acts of vandalism. Díaz-Canel issues his statement. Complaints are legitimate as long as they are expressed with civility, but there will be no impunity for vandalism. It is the same formula used after the July 11th protests in 2021. No accountability for the teacher, no official statement about the video, but pro-government accounts publicly identify Kevin Samuel Echeverria Rodriguez, the injured 16-year-old, and emphasize he has reached criminal liability age. His current status has not been independently confirmed. A second clip surfaces. A different classroom. A female student, visibly emotional, confronts a teacher. Sabe lo que es acostarse sin comer nada y tampoco poder dormir en toda la noche a causa del apagón. Do you know what it is to go to bed without eating anything and not be able to sleep all night because of the blackout? TV Azteca reports she put into words what many Cuban families have been living for a long time. Journalist Mario J. Penton amplifies the clip. The teacher in Morón defends conditions she does not live. This student describes conditions she cannot escape. That is the gap the revolution cannot explain. In Camagüey, walk into a technical school, and every other classroom has no teacher. 51% staffing, 1 in 2 positions empty. Across Cuba, it is the same story at different scales. UNESCO confirmed in February 2026 26,000 vacant teaching positions, over 2,000 schools needing urgent support, fuel shortages affecting more than 1 million students. The deficit has grown relentlessly. 10,000 vacancies in 2022, 17,000 in 2023, 24,000 in 2024, 26,000 now. The number of higher education graduates collapsed 74% between 2012 and 2017, falling from 89,560 to 23,478. The pipeline that produces teachers has itself collapsed. Cuban teachers earn between 2,500 and 3,000 pesos per month. At current exchange rates, that is 13 to 15 US dollars. In Mexico, a public school teacher earns roughly 400. In Chile, over 1,000. In Uruguay, around 900. Cuban teachers earn 30 to 100 times less than their counterparts anywhere else in Latin America. The government's 2025 response was a seniority supplement of 1,000 to 3,000 pesos, between $2.74 and $8.22 per month. The Vice Minister of Education admitted the budget could not support a general raise. In Guantanamo province, teachers received burro bananas as a bonus. When emigration surged after 2021, teachers left with everyone else. The system that once held them had one structural advantage: they could not leave. That advantage is gone. The conditions the teacher in Morón wished on the world: leaking roofs, broken windows, no running water, closed restrooms. In Havana, only 10% of schools had been repaired by the start of the 2025 school year. A content creator revisited her school in Santa Clara after 13 years and found ruins. Students receive 2 pencils from the state. Parents pay 15,000 Cuban pesos, 2.5 months' salary, to dress their children for school. With daily blackouts exceeding 20 hours in some provinces, the Higher Institute of Art suspended classes indefinitely. UNICEF, in 2024, included Cuba for the first time in its global report on child food poverty. No pencils, no textbooks in some provinces, no teachers in half the classrooms in Camagüey, no water, no food. But every morning, without fail, Pioneros por el comunismo, Seremos como el Che. First-grade math textbooks from 2023 use images of Fidel Castro to teach geometric shapes. In September 2025, schools across Cuba forced students to sign declarations of support for Nicolás Maduro. The human rights organization Cuba Lex called the school system a political control instrument, and the forced campaigns psychological violence against minors. Psychologist Sergio Llanes put it plainly: Cuban schools don't educate. They don't teach citizenship or coexistence, just ideology. The revolution's education record was real. The 1961 literacy campaign mobilized over 250,000 volunteers and reduced illiteracy from roughly 23% to under 4% in a single year. A 1998 UNESCO study found Cuban students scored significantly above the regional average. At its peak, Cuba spent 14% of GDP on education, among the highest rates in the world. Díaz-Canel opened the 2025 school year calling education, quote, one of the most beautiful and vital achievements of the revolution, at a school Fidel Castro himself inaugurated 50 years ago. But that system depended on a structure that no longer exists: captive labor. Teachers who could not emigrate, in a closed economy where $13 a month was survivable because there was nowhere else to go. After 2021, when emigration surged, the structure collapsed. The achievement was real. The conditions that produced it are gone. Reversing this collapse would require things the regime cannot provide without changing what it is. Teacher salaries competitive enough to stop emigration would mean multiplying the education budget many times over in an economy that cannot keep the lights on. Ending indoctrination would mean surrendering the school system's political function, which the regime considers non-negotiable. Reopening schools to independent assessment would mean admitting the scale of the failure. The government's actual 2025 proposal was what Díaz-Canel called spiritual, emotional, and material attention for teachers. The Vice Minister of Education admitted the budget cannot support a general salary increase. The gap between what is needed and what is offered is not a policy failure. It is a structural impossibility within the current system. The regime cannot fix the schools without undermining the controls that keep the regime in place.
Something has shifted. The teacher in Morón delivered the regime's script. A student recorded it and posted it to Instagram. Within 48 hours, it was international news. At a different school, in a different city, the student who cried about hunger did the same. In November 2025, a physical fight broke out between a teacher and student in Artemisa. In September, a school director was filmed screaming at teachers on the first day of classes. These videos are not accidents. Cuban students are documenting the system's failure in real time, on the same phones the regime cannot afford to give them. The generational transmission of ideology requires a minimum of credibility. When a teacher in one school wishes these conditions on the world, while a student in another cannot eat dinner, that credibility is zero.
It is already happening. Education is privatizing along remittance lines. Families who receive dollars hire tutors. Families who don't simply lose access. The teacher deficit will cross 30,000. More schools will close. UNESCO's February call for international cooperation signals how far the crisis has gone. But aid requires the regime to accept external oversight it has historically refused. And the students who recorded the Morón teacher and the hungry student are the first generation of Cubans who can broadcast the gap between ideology and reality to a global audience instantly. The regime has no strategy for this. It has directives it can delete and teachers it can send. It does not have an answer.
The teacher in Morón could not explain what system Cuba has after insisting it is not a dictatorship. She said socialism. She said not a dictatorship. She could not say what it is. At a different school, in a different city, a student could not explain what she ate for dinner. There was no dinner. Between those two silences is the entire story of Cuban education in 2026. 26,000 teachers are missing. The ideology is not. The schools have no water, no food, no glass in the windows, no staff in half the classrooms. But every morning, the children who show up still recite, Pioneros por el comunismo, Seremos como el Che. The revolution's greatest achievement is now its most visible failure, and the students are filming.
26,000 teachers are missing. The ideology is not. Morón, Cuba, March 2026.
A mí no están pidiendo, ¿y qué dan? ¿Qué es lo que dieron ellos? Para estar hablando así de negocio. Y además de eso, acabar con mira lugares residenciales de aquí en Morón. Eso nunca se vio en farmacia que donde están los medicamentos, pero además de eso las tiendas del Estado. ¿Por qué no fueron entonces a tirar una MIPYME? ¿No se preguntaron eso? Entonces van a tirarle entonces al partido. Ahora, ¿y por qué al partido? Esa es la pregunta que hizo todo el mundo. Porque recuérdenme una cosa. Muy financiado, muy pagado. Pero recuérdenme una cosa, que van a cumplir con lo que está establecido. Y las leyes no están puestas aquí en Cuba. Yo quería, de todas maneras, después, recuerden bien que tengo clase aquí con todo el mundo hoy. Yo voy a entrar a todos los grupos. Y voy a decir lo que tengo que decir. Porque estoy cabrona desde que vi eso, desde el punto de vista porque son jóvenes. Y yo agradezco a David que fue a mi casa y me explicó una serie de cosas. Pero desde el punto de vista, la juventud está, sinceramente, si ustedes tienen verdaderamente